Sharp safety. This training is broken into 3 sections. Part 1 is a background on the nature of Sharps injuries, the risks of exposure to bloodborne pathogens, and how and where injuries occur. Part 2 describes the types of engineered Sharps injury prevention devices, and Part 3 describes safe work practices to prevent Sharps injuries. This training was developed to remind everyone of the importance of Sharps safety. The concepts are not new, rather meant to bring this important information back into the limelight. Let's get started with Part 1, a background in Sharps safety. Occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens from needle sticks and other Sharps injuries is a serious problem. The Center for Disease Control estimates each year 385,000 needle sticks and other Sharps-related injuries are sustained by hospital-based healthcare personnel. This is greater than 1,000 per day. There are many more Sharps injuries occurring at other healthcare facilities. The major areas of concern are 1. Hepatitis B, or HBV, 2. Hepatitis C, or HCV, 3. Human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. However, more than 20 other pathogens can also be a concern with an accidental Sharps injury. The direct costs associated with the initial and follow-up treatment of exposed healthcare personnel ranges from $71 to $5,000, depending on the necessary treatment. There are several costs that are more difficult to quantify, and these costs are not included in the previous range. These would include, but are not limited to, the emotional cost from fear and anxiety, the direct and indirect costs associated with potential side effects from antiretroviral toxicities and lost time from work, the societal cost if HIV or HCV seroconversion occurs. If seroconversion of either HIV or HCV occurs, then the costs become very large. The average risk of transmission after an occupational percutaneous exposure varies by the type of bloodborne pathogen. As you can see, one is at a higher risk for being infected with hepatitis B following a Sharps injury than for hepatitis C or HIV. Fortunately, hepatitis B has a vaccine and immune globulin that can protect healthcare personnel from becoming infected. Due to its effectiveness, the hepatitis B vaccine is heavily promoted for healthcare personnel. The average risk for hepatitis C transmission after a percutaneous exposure to HCV-infected blood is approximately 1 in 50 exposures. The average risk for human immunodeficiency virus infection after a percutaneous exposure to HIV-infected blood is about 1 in 300 exposures. To date, there have been 57 documented cases of occupational HIV transmission to healthcare personnel, and 137 possible cases in healthcare personnel where the source of infection and/or seroconversion could not be definitively determined. Of the 57 documented cases of occupational HIV transmission, 88%, or 50 of these, involved a percutaneous exposure through a contaminated needle or other Sharps device. The majority of these injuries were associated with hollow bore needles, the type typically used in a vein or artery. An additional 5 cases were the result of mucocutaneous, or through the skin or mucous membrane, exposures. The route of exposure is unknown for the remaining 2 cases. Because of the extensive ramifications associated with Sharps injuries, we need to make a collective goal to prevent Sharps injuries. To prevent Sharps injuries, we must understand how they occur, who gets injured, where they happen, what devices are involved, when and how the injuries occur, and most importantly, how can they be prevented. It's important to remember that examining individual work practices and settings is critical in reducing the risk of a Sharps injury. Think through your day and make a list of situations that could be made safer. Data show that nurses sustain the highest percentage of percutaneous injuries. However, other patient care providers are also at risk. Although sharps injuries can occur anywhere within a healthcare setting, the largest percentages occur on inpatient units, particularly in ICUs and in operating rooms. Injuries with needles and other sharp devices can happen at any time during use. Data show that the majority of injuries occur during or immediately after use. During use injuries often occur when the device is being inserted or withdrawn, and/or if the patient moves. After use injuries occur during cleanup or in transit to another location. Injuries during disposal often involve placing the used sharps device into the container, or if the sharps device was not disposed of properly. There are a wide variety of sharps used in healthcare today. Any of these do pose a risk of contributing to an accidental sharps injury. However, the top 6 devices are shown here and represent 78% of all injuries. Hollow bore needles are of particular concern because they likely contain residual blood, and this is associated with a higher rate of transmission of a bloodborne pathogen. Hollow bore needles alone account for 56% of all sharps injuries. This slide looks at 10,239 sharps injuries from June 1995 to December 2003. The percentages show a more detailed circumstance about the sharps injury. With needle-free IV systems available now, some of these categories would be eliminated. The same applies to recapping injuries. Many injuries occur after use on the patient, such as during cleanup or in transit to disposal and during disposal. The period of time after use on the patient is critical to examine. Once again, make a list of situations and settings that could be altered to make your workplace safer. Most sharps injuries are preventable. By looking carefully at the details, studies have shown that 64% of sharps injuries with hollow bore needles are preventable. Only use needles when necessary. Use devices with engineered safety features. Follow proper work practices. Properly dispose of sharps. Use verbal announcements when passing a sharps instrument. Hand-to-hand passage can be completely avoided by using a basin or neutral zone. Brainstorm with coworkers to create a safer workplace. This list is simple. Make it a part of your practice.